Okay, fifth grade, today we start lesson 2-3 on estimating sums and differences, which is found on page 36 and 37 in your textbook. Please have your spiral notebooks out and open to your next clean page. And let's get our objective down for today, which is that I can use rounding and compatible numbers to estimate sums and differences of whole numbers and decimals. So by the end of today, we would like to have a good concept and grasp of how to use rounding and compatible numbers to estimate. Okay? Put down Roman numeral 1 for me, please, and write out your question. How can you estimate sums and differences? Again, if we need to, a reminder, what's a sum? Remember, sum is the answer to an addition problem, and a difference is the answer to a subtraction problem, just as a reminder. So one way put down is that you can round each number. So to get our estimate, we're going to use rounding, which we've been practicing. And B, another way, is to use compatible numbers. Now that's something new we haven't talked about this year. And what is a compatible number? I put it here for you in parentheses. Compatible numbers are numbers that are easy to add or subtract in our heads, meaning we don't need to use pen and paper or a calculator. We should be able to do it on our own in our heads. Okay, good, fifth grade. Get this first set of notes, please, down in your spiral. And if you have questions on any of this, go ahead and write it down. Now we are going to go into our textbook, page 36, at the top where it says estimating sums and differences. It says, how can you estimate sums? And they give you a chart there with some data on it. And it says students are collecting cans of dog food to give to an animal shelter. It says estimate the sum of the cans collected in weeks 3 and 4. So they want me to estimate how many they collected, the sums, that means we need to add, from weeks 3 and 4. Please look at your data at the top there. Week 3 cans of dog food, the number was 237. And for week 4, they collected 345 cans. So if you move to the top of page 36, they show you there the one way, which we just put in our notes. It says round each add-in to the nearest 100. Add in, that word there means the numbers you add together. And they want you to round to the nearest 100. So they took 237 and they rounded it to 200. And then they took 345, they rounded that to 300. So 200 plus 300 gives us 500. So you'll see there it says 237 plus 345 is about 500. Again, when you see that word about, that's what comes in with estimating, because you're giving an answer that is close to or about something, not the actual answer. It says the students collected about 500 cans of dog food in weeks 3 and 4. So that was one way, using rounding. Another way is to substitute compatible numbers. This is at the top again of page 37. Stay with me. It says compatible numbers are easy to add. Fifth grade, what numbers are easier to add? When numbers end in what? Let's think about that. Yeah, most of the time you're really good with numbers that add in 0 and 5. So when you look at your number to find an easy number or compatible number, look to see if you can change it to something that ends in a 5 or a 0. Good, so you see here 237. You could also use your skills that we just learned on rounding. Is 237, is it close to 200, 250, or 300? Because all of those numbers would be easier to add. And you will see there they took 237 and rounded it to 250. Again, now plus 345. 345, is that closer to 300, 350, or 400? You will see there that that is also closer to 350. So now you can add 250 plus 350 to get 600. So you will see there 237 plus 345 is about 600. The students collected about 600 cans of dog food in weeks 3 and 4. Okay, now fifth grade, those are two examples of how to round and then use compatible numbers for whole numbers. Now let's switch over, go to the another example on page 236. And it says, how can you estimate differences? So differences are the answer to our subtraction problems. So they say here, estimate 22 and 8/10 minus 13 and 9/10. And again, one way, they put round each number to the nearest whole number. So 22 and 8/10 gets rounded to 23. And 13 and 9/10 gets rounded to 14. So then they did 23 minus 14 gives us 9. Okay, so then 22 and 8/10 minus 13 and 9/10 is about 9. That's one way. That was using rounding. Now let's look at the other way with compatible numbers. It says substitute compatible numbers. So 22 and 8/10, again, they rounded up to 25 because 25 ending in 5 is easier to do in our heads. And then take away 13 and 19/10, they rounded 13 and 19/10 to 15. So now all we have to do is 25 minus 15, which gets 10. So 28 and 8/10 minus 13 and 9/10 is about 10. Okay, so those are the examples that are written there in your textbook, and you can just follow along. You don't have to copy those now because in a minute we're going to do some problems together. Look at explain it. It says which estimate is closer to the actual difference, and how can you tell without subtracting? What they want you to be able to see, and we're going to go over this later and write it down later, is how do I know which one is closer, by rounding or by using compatible numbers? And you do that by looking back at your examples and seeing which numbers were closer to the actual numbers you started with. So for number 1 there, it would have been the first way with rounding because you came up with 9. Okay, and the rounded numbers there are closer to the original numbers than the compatible numbers. And then explain it number 2 says, when is it appropriate to estimate an answer? It's appropriate to estimate when you do not need an exact answer. So anytime you don't need exact, you always want to go ahead and use rounding. Another thing we will discuss is why do we need to do estimating? You do use estimating in everyday life, especially maybe when you are grocery shopping and buying food or getting ready to go out and pick up food for dinner. You need to estimate about how much money you need to bring with. And we'll get into whether we would need to estimate, would we round up for that or round down? Yeah, you would want to round up so you have enough money. So keep that in mind when we're working with estimating.